Now, the French president has labeled the policies under the Trump administration that are impacting research a mistake. Emmanuel Macron making those comments at the Choose Europe for Science conference hosted by Paris. The EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen was also in attendance, and she outlined how the bloc would launch an initiative package worth some 500 million euros. Take a listen.
I can announce that we will put forward a new 500 million euro package for 2025 to 2027 to make Europe a magnet for researchers. This will help support the best and the brightest researchers and scientists from Europe and around the world.
Let's cherish free and open science and reject a diktat that would mean a government can say it's forbidden to research this or that. Women's health, cyclones, or the climate. Every time, lives are put at risk. It's the progress of humanity that's called into question.
We can now bring in David Paltiel, professor at the Yale School of Public Health. Thank you so much for joining us on the program today. You're based in the United States, so I want to start with what's going on in the U.S. first. The Trump administration has been pretty intent on slashing the budgets of so-called woke initiatives. Can you give me an example of what research is at risk right now?
Thank you for having me. Programs at risk, grants at risk, grants that are involving clinical trials of vulnerable populations, transgenders, anything that has to do with diversity in sexual health, those sorts of programs are at risk. And it's a broader swath of grants that are also threatened simply because I think in the broader context, the administration is trying to turn the lights off on the large research universities.
So these are grants that have already been approved and projects that are already in the works.
I don't know any colleagues who have not received at least one stop work order or one grant termination. Yes, absolutely, things that are already up and running.
Okay, so today we had Europe and France essentially hosting this conference to attract that talent, potentially talent who had their research hindered in the United States. What did you gauge from the showing today here in Paris?
I thought it was a tremendous event. And the first thing to say more than anything else is thank you to the people of Europe, to the president, for their show of solidarity. I took from it several things. First is the fact that they are creating a platform for the things we care about: independent research, academic freedom. They are emboldening the many people in the United States who are currently afraid to come out of the woodwork for fear that they will call attention to themselves. And they're making a generous offer of funding, not nearly enough to replace what's currently being funded in the United States, but certainly an initial investment, which, if it is carefully prioritized, could make an enormous difference.
Let's talk about the money for a second, because the EU Commission President outlined some 500 million euros. France says it will earmark 100 million. Still questions over where that money will actually come from. Talk us through the difference in budgets here in Europe versus the United States, because it pales in comparison, doesn't it?
It does. Its order of magnitude's different. The budget of the National Institute of Health alone is $60 billion. It's estimated that the overall budget of the United States for research and development is of the order of $200 billion. So if one measures the success of this new platform on its ability to replace the United States as a funder of research, I don't think that you're going to have much happiness or success. But I don't think that's the necessary measure of success. As I said before, the measure of success here is the degree to which it emboldens, it empowers, and the degree to which it can help essential research from slipping between the cracks.
Because I have a friend who worked in public hospitals here in France for many years, and then went to the United States to do his postdoc, and then got funding for research from the United States. So now his research, which he's doing back here in Europe right now, is owned by an American company. whatever comes out of it, right? So would people like him be impacted by what France is trying to do, what Europe is trying to do now?
Well, first, let's just say you're absolutely right. And as President Macron said, this is a gross miscalculation on the part of the United States government. Because just as he said, this is research that doesn't just save lives in some faraway place. This is research that eventually comes to benefit all of us. So yes, your friend's research is absolutely impacted, but more importantly, it impacts all of us.
I just wanted to ask, the U.S. has been this pioneer for such a long time. When we think of scientific research, in the news we covered dire wolves, which was an extinct species making a comeback. Things that were unthinkable seem to happen in the United States. Despite the moves from the Trump administration, that is still going to always be the case, won't it?
I don't know. I really don't.
Won't researchers, like scientific researchers, learn to adapt with the climate they're dealing with? Maybe climate change is called something else, but...
Well, I do believe that the pendulum will eventually swing back and that things will get so bad that people will turn on the administration and begin to, up funding for science. But a lot of damage is going to be done in the interim. What you do need to know is that, yes, the United States has been a research hub for many years, but there is a lot of talent here in France and in Europe more generally. I've done a tremendous amount of work with the French National Agency for AIDS Research. And while it is true that you might think of the U.S. Funding system as a super tanker of your systems are speedboats, and your response to COVID, to Ebola, to MPOC has been spectacularly effective.
What are some of the challenges besides funding? Do you think of setting up research facilities here in France or Europe for you?
Well, before we talk about me personally, I do think it's important to recognize that it is not unreasonable for the French scientific community to be asking itself the question, what about us? Why are you funding American researchers when in fact we are underfunded? And it is true that there's plenty of reason to complain here in France. My hope is that this is a tide that will lift all boats, because if Europe is to be the center and the hub of a research renaissance, which was what I heard President Macron say today, you're going to need both. You're going to need both a native science community, and you're also going to have to be a place that provides shelter and welcome to the brains of the world.
So, in terms of challenges, besides the funding shortfalls, do you see any other red tapeism, anything of that sort?
Just general infrastructure, laboratories, support. I benefit from the fact that I am at Yale University, where I have an enormous library, where I call the IT department and they come and fix my computer right away, where I have a finance and contracts group that takes care of all the financial aspects and compliance. It is true that my French colleagues do it all themselves, and that means that they have much less time for the actual work of research. So that infrastructure will also need to be invested in.
Interesting point, David Paltiel. We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us on the program today.